The US is signaling support for a so-called post-war security force in Ukraine, but only on its terms. Washington will supply the muscle, Europe the flag, exposing once again who really calls the shots. For allies, the message is clear. Without American air power, logistics and radar, any EU mission is dead on arrival. For Moscow, it's provocation dressed up as peacekeeping. And while Trump mocks the Kremlin's rhetoric, he's offered no real consequences, raising the question, is this deterrence or just another performance? The US has signaled its readiness to provide support for any European-led security plan for post-conflict Ukraine. The Financial Times reported on August 26th, citing unnamed European officials. Senior US officials reportedly told their European counterparts in multiple discussions that Washington would be prepared to contribute strategic enablers to back up a potential EU-led deployment on the ground, 4 sources told the newspaper. The potential assistance could include US aircraft, logistics support, and ground-based radar supporting and enabling a European-enforced no-fly zone and air shield for the country. France and the UK have brought together a group of primarily European NATO members in a coalition of the willing to support Ukraine amid waning US interest, which has repeatedly signalled its readiness to send a reassurance force there after the end of the hostilities between Kiev and Moscow. In private conversations, however, EU officials have admitted that such a deployment would only materialise if the US provides support to enable, oversee and protect European troops, the newspaper noted. However, Financial quoted the Pentagon as saying, "The reported measures are pre-decisional, and the Defense Department will not comment on pre-decisional topics." Speaking to reporters at the Oval Office, the US President said,
"When Europe is going to give them significant security guarantees, and they should because they're right there. But we'll be involved from the standpoint of backup. We're going to help them. And I think if we get a deal, and I think we will, but if we get a deal, you're not going to. I don't believe you're going to have much of a problem. But we'll back it up because I want to stop seeing people being killed. You know, when Biden was here, he gave $350 billion. You know this from covering business. $350 billion to Ukraine.
Moscow has repeatedly rejected the idea of troops from NATO countries being deployed in any capacity to Ukraine, warning that the move would only lead to a broader conflict. The stance was reiterated by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov over the weekend when the top diplomat said the guarantees must be subject to consensus, while a foreign military intervention of any sort was absolutely unacceptable. On August 26th, US President Donald Trump responded to the Kremlin's attacks on President Volodymyr Zelensky's legitimacy as a leader, dismissing their objections as posturing.
This past weekend, Sergei Lavrov was saying that Putin will not sign a peace deal with Zelensky because Russia views him as illegitimate. I'm just wondering if the Russians had been relaying this to your team, if they view Zelensky, as a leader worth signing a peace deal with, if they will go to the table.
Doesn't matter what they say. Steve can answer, but I can answer too. Doesn't matter what they say. Everybody's posturing. It's all bullshit, okay? Everybody's posturing. Steve, do you have a different answer?
I agree with you, sir.
Trump's remarks came after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told NBC News on August 22nd that Moscow does not recognize Zelensky as Ukraine's legitimate leader. Lavrov claimed Russian President Vladimir Putin could not sign a peace deal with him because Zelensky lacks the authority to sign legal documents. Lavrov also said Putin was not prepared to meet Zelensky and had no plans for talks, despite Trump's push for a summit, and Zelensky's stated willingness to discuss territorial issues directly with Putin. Although Trump dismissed Moscow's rhetoric, he stopped short of pledging consequences for Russia's continued stalling and did not mount a defense of Zelensky's legitimacy. When asked if Russia faced a deadline for a deal or penalties, Trump declined to set a timeline, though he acknowledged sanctions remained a possibility.
It's very serious what I have in mind if I have to do it. But I want to see it end. I think that in many ways he's there. Sometimes he'll be there and Zelensky won't be there. You know, it's like, who do we have today? I got to get them both at the same time. But I want to have it end. We have economic sanctions. I'm talking about economic, because we're not going to get into a world war. I'll tell you what, in my opinion, if I didn't win this race, Ukraine could have ended up in a world war. We're not going to end up in a world war anymore.
He further said that Ukraine should not have gone to war with a nation 15 times its size.
President Putin and President Zelensky, but I think I'll get it done. You never know. It's war. With war, you never know, right? War's very tricky, very horrible, but with war, you never know. Things change. People go into war, think they're going to win the war, and then they get their asses kicked, and they lose their country, and they lose millions of lives. Nobody goes into a war thinking they're going to lose. They go in. I'm sure that Ukraine thought they were going to win. It's going to be, you know, we're going to win. You're going to beat somebody that's 15 times your size.
German fighter jets were scrambled on August 26th to intercept a Russian Il-20 reconnaissance aircraft over the Baltic Sea, Deutsche Welle, DW, reported. 2 Eurofighters took off from the Rostock-Lag Air Base after the Russian plane was detected flying without a flight plan and with its transponders switched off, according to DW. The incident adds to a string of aerial provocations NATO allies have reported since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, with Moscow suspected of using such flights to spy on alliance positions. It also marks the 10th interception involving German aircraft since the start of 2025. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, military officials acknowledged for the first time on August 26th that Russian forces have entered the Dnipropetrovsk region, a central area long shelled during the war, but until now spared major ground fighting. Viktor Tregubov, spokesperson for the Dnipro Operational Strategic Group, confirmed the development to AFP, saying, "Yes, they have entered, and fighting is ongoing as of now." AFP noted that Moscow had first claimed advances into the region back in July, despite never having made a formal territorial claim. Since then, Russia has asserted control over several settlements there.